What if I told you that history is not just a collection of dates and events, but a story shaped by decisions so bold, so controversial, that they changed the course of entire civilizations? Imagine being in the shoes of a ruler standing at the edge of a momentous choice. Would you take a risk knowing it could lead to glory or disaster? Throughout history, ancient leaders grappled with these very dilemmas. Their actions weren't always celebrated, and their legacies are often marked by both triumph and turmoil. From the audacity of Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon to the groundbreaking reforms of Emperor Ashoka after the bloody Kalinga War, these moments weren't just turning points, they were sparks that ignited larger transformations. But were they decisions of genius or reckless gambles? Stay with us as we uncover 25 of the most controversial decisions by ancient leaders, each one a tale of power, ambition, and the price of shaping history. By the end, you might find yourself questioning what truly defines greatness in leadership. Now turning to one of the most transformative and contentious moments in Roman history, we have Julius Caesar's decision to cross the Rubicon River in the year 49 before the Common Era. At the time, Roman law strictly forbade any general from bringing their army into Italy proper, as the Rubicon served as a sacred boundary meant to protect the Republic from internal military threats. But for Julius Caesar, this moment was about far more than following the rules. It was about taking a calculated step to secure his power and political future. Facing mounting opposition from the Roman Senate, who demanded he disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, Caesar knew complying would leave him vulnerable to his enemies. Instead, he defied tradition and crossed the river with his loyal legion, an act of open rebellion and a declaration of civil war. The stakes couldn't have been higher. To his supporters, this was an act of courage, a bold move against a Senate seen as corrupt and self-serving. To his opponents, it was a reckless betrayal of the Republic's ideals, a move that threatened to dismantle centuries of governance. The phrase, crossing the Rubicon, has since become synonymous with making an irreversible decision, and for good reason. Caesar's gamble paid off. The civil war that followed ended with his ultimate victory, and his rise to power as Rome's dictator for life marked the beginning of the end for the Roman Republic. While some hailed him as a visionary leader who paved the way for the Roman Empire, others viewed him as a power-hungry figure whose actions destabilized the foundations of Roman democracy. This single decision continues to spark debate among historians and serves as a powerful example of how ambition can reshape the course of history for better or worse. As the next challenge unfolds, we journey to ancient Egypt and the enigmatic reign of Cleopatra, a ruler whose decisions have fascinated and divided opinions for centuries. Cleopatra's alliances with Julius Caesar and later Marc Antony were as much strategic as they were personal, shaping both her legacy and the fate of Egypt itself. When Cleopatra first allied with Julius Caesar, it was during a period of internal turmoil. Egypt was entangled in a civil war, and Cleopatra's position as queen was anything but secure. Aligning herself with Caesar, one of the most powerful men in Rome, was not merely a romantic endeavor but a calculated political move. Through this partnership, she secured her throne and strengthened Egypt's position in the face of Roman dominance. However, this decision did not come without consequences. Many Egyptians saw her relationship with Caesar as a betrayal, accusing her of prioritizing Roman interests over her own people. The alliance also drew sharp criticism in Rome, where Cleopatra was often portrayed as a manipulative foreign queen corrupting their leader. Years later, following Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra aligned with another influential Roman figure, Marc Antony. Together, they formed a powerful partnership both politically and personally. Cleopatra and Antony's union was a bold attempt to create an Eastern power bloc capable of rivaling Rome's dominance. They shared a vision of a vast empire that would extend from Egypt to the eastern provinces of Rome. However, this only deepened the divide between Antony and his rival Octavian, setting the stage for one of history's most famous conflicts. Their relationship became a focal point of propaganda in Rome, with Octavian painting Cleopatra as a dangerous seductress who sought to undermine Roman values and sovereignty. This narrative fueled public outrage and solidified support for Octavian, who ultimately defeated Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. Cleopatra's alliances with these Roman leaders were undeniably controversial, both in her time and in the centuries that followed. To some, she was a shrewd leader who used her intelligence and influence to protect her kingdom in an era of Roman expansion. To others, she was a reckless ruler whose decisions hastened Egypt's decline. Regardless of perspective, Cleopatra's choices exemplify the complex interplay of power, politics, and ambition, a delicate balance that can sway entire civilizations. Moving forward, we step into another chapter of ancient history to uncover the groundbreaking yet contentious laws of Hammurabi, shedding light on a leader whose decisions would forever shape justice and governance. Now turning to the ancient city of Babylon, we encounter one of the earliest and most influential legal systems in history, Hammurabi's Code. This groundbreaking set of laws, established by King Hammurabi, was revolutionary in its attempt to bring order and justice to a complex and growing society. Written on a towering stone stele for all to see, the code laid out nearly 300 laws governing various aspects of life, from trade and property to family and personal conduct. At its core was the principle of retributive justice, famously summarized as an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. While this idea sought to ensure fairness by creating proportional punishments, it also sparked intense debate, both in Hammurabi's time and in the centuries that followed. Some of the laws were applauded for protecting the vulnerable, such as provisions aimed at safeguarding widows, orphans, and debtors, yet the code also revealed stark inequalities. For example, the severity of punishments often depended on the social status of those involved. If a wealthy individual harmed someone of lower status, their penalty might be less severe than if the roles were reversed. Additionally, some of the laws seemed excessively harsh by modern standards. One infamous example dictated that if a builder's negligence caused a house to collapse and result in the death of the owner's son, the builder's own son would be executed in retribution. Such laws not only highlight the harsh realities of ancient justice, but also raise questions about the morality and practicality of such measures. The societal response to Hammurabi's code was equally complex. While many likely viewed the codification of laws as a step toward fairness and stability, there were undoubtedly those who resented the rigid and often brutal penalties it enforced. However, its impact cannot be overstated. Hammurabi's code set a precedent for written law and laid the foundation for legal principles still debated and referenced today. As we leave behind the towering stele of Babylon, our journey takes us eastward to the Indian subcontinent, where we explore the profound and polarizing transformation of Emperor Ashoka, a ruler whose decisions would redefine both his life and his empire. As the next challenge unfolds, we arrive in ancient India, where the life of Emperor Ashoka, one of history's most fascinating leaders, took an extraordinary turn. Early in his reign, Ashoka was known for his unrelenting ambition and ruthless conquests, the most infamous being the bloody Kalinga War. This conflict left tens of thousands dead and countless others displaced, but its aftermath proved to be a turning point that would redefine not only Ashoka's legacy, but also the spiritual and cultural fabric of his empire. Consumed by profound remorse over the sheer devastation he had caused, Ashoka made the groundbreaking decision to renounce violence and adopt Buddhism, a philosophy that emphasized compassion, nonviolence, and the pursuit of enlightenment. This transformation was as dramatic as it was controversial. In his earlier years, Ashoka's aggressive expansionism had earned him both fear and respect as a formidable ruler. but his newfound commitment to peace and ethical governance shocked his court and subjects alike. He began prioritizing the welfare of his people, initiating reforms that included constructing hospitals, digging wells, and planting shade trees for travelers. He also disseminated edicts urging moral conduct, religious tolerance, and kindness to all living beings, displaying them on pillars and rocks across his vast empire. These edicts, written in languages accessible to his diverse subjects, were unprecedented in their scope and humanitarian focus. However, Ashoka's pivot to Buddhism was not without its challenges. His decision alienated certain factions within his empire, particularly the military elite, who had thrived under his earlier campaigns of conquest. Many questioned whether a ruler devoted to nonviolence could adequately protect his realm from external threats or maintain order within. Furthermore, some traditionalists viewed his promotion of Buddhism as a departure from established customs and beliefs, creating tensions that rippled through the fabric of society. Yet, Ashoka's commitment to his principles remained unwavering. By embracing Buddhism, he not only sought personal redemption, but also aimed to create a model of governance rooted in compassion and ethical responsibility. His legacy as a ruler who chose the path of peace over power endures to this day, with his symbols and ideals continuing to inspire millions around the world. As the sun rises on the next chapter of our journey, we turn toward the Roman Empire, where the decisions of Constantine the Great would forever alter the course of history. Now turning to the Roman Empire, we encounter Constantine the Great, a ruler whose decisions would profoundly shape the spiritual and cultural trajectory of Europe. In the year 313, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, a monumental decree that legalized Christianity within the empire. Up until this point, Christians had faced waves of persecution, often blamed for societal problems and treated as outcasts. Constantine's decision not only ended these persecutions, but also granted Christianity a status of legitimacy that it had never before enjoyed. For many, this marked the dawn of a new era, one in which the faith would flourish under the protection of imperial authority. But this decision was far from universally celebrated. The Roman Empire had long been rooted in a polytheistic tradition, venerating a pantheon of gods that played a central role in both public and private life. Traditionalists viewed Constantine's embrace of Christianity as a threat to the established order, fearing that it undermined the cultural and religious unity that had held the empire together for centuries. The shift also created tensions among various religious factions, as the newfound prominence of Christianity often came at the expense of other beliefs. Yet Constantine's motives went beyond mere religious conviction. Politically, the legalization of Christianity helped him consolidate power by aligning himself with an increasingly influential and organized religious community. This move not only bolstered his position as emperor, but also began integrating Christian principles into the fabric of Roman governance. Over time, Constantine's reign paved the way for the Christianization of Europe, setting in motion a transformation that would redefine the continent's identity for generations. Constantine's decision to champion Christianity remains one of the most pivotal and debated moments in history. It exemplified the delicate balance between personal belief, political strategy, and societal change. As we continue our exploration, we journey eastward to ancient China, where the actions of Qin Shi Huang would ignite one of the most controversial chapters in the intellectual history of the world. As the next chapter unfolds, we arrive in ancient China, where Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor who unified the vast territory, made a decision that would forever alter the course of its intellectual heritage. Determined to consolidate his power and ensure absolute control over his empire, Qin Shi Huang implemented policies aimed at erasing dissent and establishing ideological uniformity. Among these, the infamous book burning stand out as one of the most controversial measures in Chinese history. The emperor ordered the destruction of Confucian texts and other writings that he believed posed a threat to his authority. Scholars who defied this directive were subjected to persecution, with many accounts describing the brutal punishment of those who resisted, including being buried alive. Qin Shi Huang's reasoning stemmed from his desire to centralize power and suppress ideas that could challenge the legitimacy of his rule. By eliminating Confucian thought, which emphasized moral governance and the role of virtuous leadership, he sought to weaken a philosophical framework that might inspire rebellion or question the harshness of his laws. Instead, he promoted a strict legalist philosophy that championed obedience to the state above all else. This drastic move was aimed at unifying the empire under a single line of thought, but it came at a significant cost. The book burning sparked outrage and resentment among scholars and intellectuals, many of whom viewed the act as an attack on the heart of Chinese culture and wisdom. Knowledge that had been meticulously preserved for generations was reduced to ashes, and the suppression of dissenting voices created an atmosphere of fear and intellectual stagnation. Despite the emperor's intentions of fostering unity, the long-term consequences were far-reaching. Confucianism, instead of fading away, eventually re-emerged as a defining cornerstone of Chinese society, while Qin Shi Huang's legacy became tainted by the memory of these controversial actions. This episode serves as a stark reminder of how decisions driven by the pursuit of total control can backfire, leaving behind scars that endure for centuries. As we transition to our next story, we move to the Roman world once more, where the Emperor Nero's policies toward a rising religious group would take a dark and infamous turn. Now turning to the Roman world, we find ourselves in the reign of Emperor Nero, a figure whose name is synonymous with tyranny and excess. Among his most infamous actions was his brutal suppression of the early Christian community in Rome. This period of persecution coincided with the Great Fire of Rome, a catastrophic blaze that devastated much of the city in 64 AD. Historical accounts suggest that Nero sought to deflect blame for the fire, which some speculated he may have started or at least failed to control by naming Christians as scapegoats. At the time, Christianity was a fledgling and misunderstood movement, viewed with suspicion by many Romans due to its rejection of traditional Roman gods and practices. Nero capitalized on these sentiments, launching a campaign of terror against Christians that was both horrific and highly public. Reports describe Christians being arrested en masse, subjected to cruel executions, and made spectacles of brutal entertainment in arenas. Some were burned alive as human torches to illuminate Nero's gardens at night, a chilling display of the extent to which he would go to maintain his power and image. These actions were not merely acts of cruelty but also calculated political maneuvers. By targeting a marginalized group, Nero aimed to consolidate support among the rest of the Roman population, distracting them from his own failures and mounting unpopularity. However, far from quelling dissent or erasing Christianity, Nero's actions had the opposite effect. The stories of martyrdom inspired sympathy and resilience among Christians, contributing to the religion's growth in the long term. Nero's atrocities against Christians came to symbolize not just his cruelty, but also the broader challenges faced by the empire as it grappled with rising religious and social changes. As the smoke of the Great Fire cleared, Nero's legacy was irreparably damaged, remembered not as a protector of Rome but as a tyrant whose decisions only deepened the cracks in the empire. As the sun rises on the next chapter, we journey into the vast empire of Alexander the Great, where his radical approach to unification through cultural integration would spark debates that echo across millennia. As the next challenge unfolds, we step into the expansive empire of Alexander the Great, a leader whose vision went far beyond military conquest. Among his most debated decisions was his policy of fusion, a bold attempt to unite the diverse cultures within his vast empire. Alexander believed that fostering a sense of unity among the conquered peoples and his Macedonian followers was essential for maintaining stability and loyalty. One of the most striking and controversial aspects of this policy was his decision to marry Persian royalty, including Roxana, a princess of Bactria, and later Statara, the daughter of the Persian king Darius. By doing so, he symbolically tied himself to the Persian elite, sending a message that he was not merely a conqueror, but also a ruler who embraced the culture of those he had subjugated. In line with this vision, Alexander actively encouraged his officers and soldiers to take Persian wives, organizing mass weddings where hundreds of Macedonians married women of noble Persian lineage. He went further by adopting elements of Persian dress, court customs, and administrative practices, moves that deeply unsettled many of his Macedonian followers. To them, these changes seemed like a betrayal of their own customs and identity, fueling resentment and leading some to question his loyalty to his homeland. The perception of favoritism toward Persian traditions and people created tension among his troops, who had followed him loyally through years of grueling campaigns. They saw their leaders' actions as an erosion of the Macedonian values that had underpinned their shared successes. Yet, Alexander's vision was not merely about blending cultures for the sake of appearances. He understood that to truly govern such a sprawling and diverse empire, he needed to foster cooperation and diminish the divide between the conquerors and the conquered. His fusion policy aimed to create an empire where loyalty to Alexander transcended cultural and ethnic divisions. Despite the resistance it faced, this strategy hinted at a level of foresight that many leaders of his time lacked. However, the practical effects of his policies remain a topic of debate among historians. On one hand, his efforts to integrate cultures inspired admiration and cooperation in some parts of his empire. On the other hand, the cultural upheaval it caused among his own people sowed seeds of discontent that persisted long after his death. Ultimately, Alexander's fusion policy reflects both the brilliance and the hubris of his leadership. While it showcased his willingness to think beyond the conventional norms of his era, it also highlighted the challenges of balancing ambition with the expectations of those who had placed their trust in him. As we step back from the complexities of his empire, the next chapter unfolds in ancient Egypt, where a revolutionary pharaoh dared to upend centuries of tradition with a vision focused entirely on the sun. As the sun rises on the next chapter, we find ourselves in ancient Egypt, where Pharaoh Akhenaten made a decision that would shake the very foundation of his civilization. Breaking away from centuries of polytheistic tradition, Akhenaten introduced a radical religious revolution by declaring Aten, the sun disk, as the singular deity worthy of worship. This move effectively dismantled Egypt's long-standing pantheon of gods and placed Aten at the center of the spiritual and political life of the empire. Akhenaten's vision was bold, aiming to centralize religious power under his authority while promoting a form of monotheism unprecedented in Egyptian history. To reflect this dramatic shift, he even changed his own name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten, meaning effective for Aten, symbolizing his complete devotion to this new divine focus. However, what Akhenaten saw as a unifying and progressive transformation was met with fierce opposition from the powerful priesthood and much of the populace. For centuries, the temples of multiple gods had served as hubs of community, economy, and tradition. The sudden sidelining of these widely revered deities disrupted not only religious practices but also the social and economic structure of Egypt. The priesthood, in particular, viewed Akhenaten's reforms as an existential threat to their influence and wealth. Ordinary Egyptians, who had long relied on the favor of multiple gods to guide them through life's challenges, found it difficult to embrace a faith that centered entirely on an abstract concept of the sun. The grandeur of the temples dedicated to Aten and the pharaoh's insistence on his own divine connection only deepened the divide between ruler and ruled. Adding to the controversy, Akhenaten established a new capital city, Akhetaten, meaning horizon of Aten, far from the traditional power centers of Egypt. This city was designed as a symbolic break from the past, a utopian seat of power dedicated to Aten. While it represented the pharaoh's grand vision, the resources and labor diverted to build this city placed immense strain on the empire's economy and workforce. The growing resentment among the population was compounded by the practical difficulties of maintaining such an isolated and ideologically charged center of governance. To many, Akhenaten's actions appeared less like visionary leadership and more like an obsession that disregarded the needs and values of his people. After Akhenaten's death, the backlash against his policies was swift and decisive. His successors, most notably Tutankhamun, worked to restore the traditional polytheistic religion and distance themselves from what was increasingly seen as a failed experiment. Akhenaten was abandoned, its monuments and records systematically dismantled, and Akhenaten's name and legacy were deliberately erased from historical accounts. This effort to return to Egypt's traditional spiritual roots underscores the degree to which his reforms had alienated both the elite and the common people. Yet, despite the intense rejection of his ideas, Akhenaten's bold attempt at religious transformation remains one of history's earliest and most striking examples of monotheistic experimentation. It serves as a testament to the challenges of pursuing radical change and the enduring tension between vision and tradition. With the echoes of this revolutionary experiment fading into the sands of time, we now turn to the story of another leader whose decisions would shift the course of his empire, Julius Caesar, and his declaration as dictator for life. Now turning to the heart of ancient Rome, we unravel one of the most defining and controversial moments in its history, Julius Caesar's declaration as dictator for life. At a time when Rome was fiercely protective of its republican traditions, where power was shared and limited by design, Caesar's bold move sent shockwaves through the Senate and the wider Roman society. His decision to assume the title Dictator Perpetuo was unprecedented and immediately raised alarms among those who feared the erosion of Rome's republican ideals. Many senators viewed this as nothing less than a betrayal of the values that had kept Rome's political system intact for centuries, sparking whispers of tyranny and ambition unchecked. Caesar, however, was no ordinary leader. His rise to power followed years of military brilliance, political maneuvering, and a deep understanding of the Roman people's desires. By the time he took this fateful step, Caesar had already secured immense popularity among the masses, who admired his military victories and his efforts to implement sweeping reforms that directly benefited them. To some, his decision to declare himself dictator for life was a necessity, a stabilizing force in a Rome riddled with political chaos, corruption, and power struggles among the elite. They saw him as a leader who could bring order and enact change where the Senate had faltered. However, this very consolidation of power struck at the core of what the Republic stood for. The Senate, particularly those who had long viewed Caesar with suspicion, interpreted his actions as the beginning of monarchy, a system they had vehemently rejected centuries earlier. The fear that Caesar's ambition would strip away their own influence and reduce Rome's political system to a one-man rule united his opponents in a desperate bid to protect the Republic. The tension between Caesar's vision for Rome and the Senate's resistance reached a breaking point, culminating in his assassination on the Ides of March. This brutal act was justified by his detractors as a necessary sacrifice to preserve the Republic, yet it plunged Rome into further turmoil, leading to the end of the Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. Was Caesar's decision born from an insatiable appetite for personal power, or was it a pragmatic response to the instability of the times? Historians continue to debate this, but what remains clear is that his declaration as dictator for life was a turning point that reshaped the destiny of Rome forever. With this pivotal act echoing through history, we move to another figure whose leadership and decisions would also captivate the ancient world: Hannibal and his audacious crossing of the Alps. As the next challenge unfolds, we journey to the rugged terrain of the Alps to uncover one of the most daring military maneuvers in ancient history, Hannibal Barca's audacious decision to lead his army, complete with war elephants, across the towering mountain range during the Second Punic War. At a time when such a feat seemed impossible, Hannibal's choice reflected both his unparalleled ambition and his desire to strike a decisive blow against Rome by attacking it from an unexpected direction. This bold strategy was not without risk. The treacherous journey brought Hannibal face to face with nature's harshest elements, freezing temperatures, narrow and unstable mountain paths, and the constant threat of avalanches. For his army, which included roughly 37 war elephants, the journey became a grueling test of endurance, with many soldiers and animals succumbing to the extreme conditions. Despite these immense challenges, Hannibal's determination never wavered. His vision was clear: to challenge Roman supremacy by taking the fight directly to their homeland, catching them off guard. While this decision showcased his brilliance as a strategist, it also came at a heavy cost. By the time Hannibal and his remaining forces reached the Italian peninsula, his army had been significantly weakened by the journey. This raised questions among his contemporaries and even his own Carthaginian leadership about the wisdom of such a high-stakes gamble. Was the daring move worth the immense loss of life and resources? While some lauded him as a fearless leader willing to defy convention, others criticized him for recklessly endangering his troops in pursuit of personal glory. Yet, the crossing of the Alps remains a testament to Hannibal's extraordinary leadership and ability to inspire loyalty among his men. Even in the face of unimaginable hardship, his troops pressed on, driven by their leader's unwavering resolve. The journey itself became a symbol of defiance and innovation, solidifying Hannibal's reputation as one of history's most brilliant military minds. And although his ultimate campaign against Rome would fall short of permanent victory, the crossing left a lasting impression on the ancient world and a legacy of courage against impossible odds. As we leave the snowy peaks behind, we turn to another leader who faced monumental resistance in his quest to transform society itself: Pharaoh Akhenaten and his revolutionary push for monotheism. As the next phase of our journey unfolds, we delve into the vast steppes of Central Asia, where Genghis Khan made a decision that would challenge deep-rooted traditions and redefine leadership in his era. Unlike many leaders of his time who relied on family ties and noble lineage to determine positions of power, Genghis Khan chose to promote individuals based on merit and ability. This revolutionary approach allowed him to assemble a highly capable and loyal administrative and military structure, turning his once fragmented Mongol tribes into a unified and formidable empire. By recognizing talent over birthright, Genghis Khan ensured that his officers and advisors were chosen for their skills, loyalty, and effectiveness rather than their social standing. This bold move, however, did not come without controversy. Traditional Mongolian customs, deeply rooted in hereditary privilege, viewed the elevation of commoners to positions of influence as a direct challenge to the established social order. Many tribal leaders felt threatened by this shift, fearing the loss of their long-held authority and status. Resentment brewed among those who believed Genghis Khan was undermining the very fabric of their culture. Yet, despite the internal dissent, the decision proved critical to his success. It fostered innovation, adaptability, and efficiency within his ranks, enabling the Mongol army to conquer vast territories across Asia and Europe with unparalleled coordination and strategy. By prioritizing meritocracy, Genghis Khan created a culture of opportunity, where even the humblest origins could lead to greatness through hard work and loyalty. This not only motivated his people but also reinforced unity among his forces. As his empire expanded, the effectiveness of this system became undeniable, allowing the Mongols to govern diverse populations and adapt to different challenges with remarkable agility. Though controversial, it was this very approach that laid the foundation for Genghis Khan's legacy as a visionary leader who dared to defy tradition in the pursuit of greatness. Now, as we leave the windswept plains of Mongolia behind, we turn our gaze to ancient Persia, where King Xerxes embarked on an ambitious and contentious campaign that would forever shape the landscape of the Greco-Persian Wars. Now turning to ancient Persia, we find ourselves amidst one of the most ambitious military undertakings of the ancient world, King Xerxes, and his monumental invasion of Greece during the Greco-Persian Wars. Xerxes, succeeding his father Darius, sought not just to expand the Persian Empire, but also to avenge his father's defeat at the Battle of Marathon. His motivations were both personal and strategic, driven by a desire to assert Persian dominance over the Greek city-states and secure his empire's western borders. To achieve this, Xerxes orchestrated an expedition of unprecedented scale, assembling a force of hundreds of thousands of troops and an enormous fleet, a display of military might that symbolized the immense power of the Persian Empire. This invasion, however, sparked significant controversy both during and after its execution. For many Greeks, Xerxes' campaign was a direct assault on their sovereignty and freedoms, solidifying a unity among the otherwise fractious city-states that rarely aligned. For the Persians, the sheer resources and manpower devoted to the campaign raised eyebrows as it drained the empire's coffers and shifted attention away from internal governance and other territorial priorities. The controversy only deepened following the Battle of Thermopylae, where a small Greek force, led by the legendary King Leonidas of Sparta, managed to hold off the vast Persian army for days, showcasing the resolve and tactical ingenuity of Xerxes' opponents. Although the Persians eventually overwhelmed the defenders, the battle became a symbol of Greek resistance and courage. The situation escalated further at the naval battle of Salamis. Overconfident in his numbers, Xerxes underestimated the strategic prowess of the Greek forces, led by Themistocles, who lured the Persian fleet into narrow straits where their numbers became a disadvantage. The resulting defeat was catastrophic for the Persians, crippling their naval capabilities and forcing Xerxes to retreat back to Asia, leaving a portion of his army behind to continue fighting. This failure not only marked a turning point in the Greco-Persian Wars, but also damaged Xerxes' reputation as a leader. Critics within his empire questioned his judgment, while Greek historians portrayed him as a figure of hubris and overreach, further immortalizing the campaign as an example of the perils of ambition unchecked by prudence. Despite its failure, Xerxes' invasion left an indelible mark on history. It reshaped Greek identity, fostering a sense of unity that would eventually lead to the rise of Athens and Sparta as dominant powers. For Persia, it highlighted both the strengths and vulnerabilities of their empire, emphasizing the limits of expansion and the importance of careful strategy. As the towering ambitions of Xerxes fade into the annals of history, our next story takes us to the Kingdom of England, where a monarch's controversial decision to defy the Catholic Church would forever alter the course of European history. As the next challenge unfolds, we find ourselves in 16th century England, where the audacious decision of King Henry VIII set the stage for a seismic shift in both politics and religion. Henry, desperate for a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty, sought to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, who had failed to produce a surviving son. However, his request was met with fierce resistance from the Pope, who was entangled in the broader politics of Europe and unwilling to grant the annulment. Frustrated by this denial and driven by his desire for personal and dynastic stability, Henry made a decision that would reverberate far beyond his own reign. He severed ties with the Roman Catholic Church and established the Church of England, declaring himself its supreme head. This monumental act was as controversial as it was transformative. For devout Catholics in England and across Europe, Henry's decision was seen as heretical, a direct challenge to the authority of the Pope and the unity of Christendom. It plunged the kingdom into religious turmoil, creating a rift that divided families, communities, and even the nobility. The dissolution of monasteries, one of Henry's subsequent moves, not only stripped the church of its wealth and land, but also displaced countless monks, nuns, and lay workers, further fueling resentment and unrest. Politically, the break from Rome granted Henry immense power, allowing him to control religious doctrine, wealth, and appointments within his realm, yet it also exposed him to significant risks. The move alienated powerful Catholic nations like Spain and France, and within England, it sparked uprisings such as the Pilgrimage of Grace, a large-scale rebellion against his reforms. In the longer term, the creation of the Church of England had profound consequences for European history. It laid the foundation for the English Reformation, which would evolve under Henry's successors and solidify England's identity as a Protestant nation. Moreover, it set a precedent for the intertwining of religious and political authority, reshaping governance and influencing conflicts for generations to come. As Henry VIII's dramatic defiance of the Catholic Church reshaped the spiritual and political landscape, our journey now takes us eastward to ancient Persia, where a leader's philosophy of tolerance would challenge established norms and provoke both admiration and criticism in equal measure. Now turning to ancient Persia, we encounter the remarkable yet contentious leadership of Cyrus the Great, whose approach to ruling a vast and diverse empire sparked both admiration and skepticism. Cyrus, as the founder of the Persian Empire, governed over a wide array of peoples, each with their own religions, cultures, and traditions. Unlike many conquerors of his time, Cyrus adopted a policy of tolerance, allowing conquered peoples to maintain their religious practices and cultural identities. This philosophy of inclusiveness was most famously demonstrated in his decision to allow the Jewish people, exiled in Babylon, to return to their homeland and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. For many, this decision showcased Cyrus as a visionary ruler ahead of his time. His tolerance fostered a sense of loyalty among his subjects, uniting the empire under his leadership and reducing the likelihood of rebellion. Policies like these were groundbreaking, contributing to the perception of Persia as a relatively stable and prosperous realm under his reign. However, this approach was not without its critics. Among the Persian elite, there were whispers of dissent, with some viewing Cyrus's tolerance as a sign of softness, arguing that a ruler ought to impose his own culture and beliefs to assert dominance. This controversy stemmed from the belief that such leniency could undermine Persian authority, potentially emboldening subject peoples to challenge the empire's control. Yet, Cyrus's policies proved effective in maintaining peace across a sprawling territory that stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus Valley. His cylinder, often regarded as one of the earliest declarations of human rights, further exemplified his commitment to fairness and respect for diversity, but also highlighted the tensions between his ideals and traditional expectations of imperial rule. Ultimately, Cyrus's tolerance policy left an indelible mark on history, influencing later leaders who grappled with managing multicultural empires. While controversial in his time, it has since been lauded as a forward-thinking model of governance. As we leave the legacy of Cyrus the Great behind, our journey continues to ancient Rome, where the decision of an emperor to prioritize merit over tradition would challenge established norms and redefine leadership within a burgeoning empire. With the next phase of the journey in sight, we arrive at the Roman Empire under Marcus Aurelius, a philosopher king whose leadership was defined by wisdom and reflection. However, even the most revered leaders make decisions that spark lasting debate, and Marcus's choice regarding the succession of power stands as one of the most contentious moments in Roman history. Breaking from the long-held tradition of emperors selecting capable heirs through adoption, Marcus Aurelius named his biological son Commodus as his successor. This decision puzzled many, as the adoption system had previously ensured that the empire was entrusted to individuals deemed competent and prepared to rule. Commodus, however, was neither. When Marcus Aurelius passed away, Commodus ascended to the throne, and his reign quickly unraveled into chaos. Known for his narcissism and erratic behavior, Commodus abandoned the principles of governance that had stabilized Rome for generations. He squandered the empire's resources on personal luxuries and gladiatorial games, often participating in the arena himself to stroke his ego, actions considered beneath the dignity of an emperor. His mismanagement led to widespread corruption, diminishing the morale of the military and weakening Rome's administrative framework. Perhaps most damaging was his disregard for the Senate, whom he openly despised, further straining the fragile relationship between the Roman government and its leader. Commodus's reckless leadership plunged Rome into political instability, setting the stage for a series of short-lived and ineffective rulers in the years to come. The empire, once a model of organization and power, began to show cracks under the weight of his incompetence and self-indulgence. Critics have long questioned why Marcus Aurelius, a man of immense foresight and intellect, chose Commodus, whose flaws were evident even during his youth. Some suggest that Marcus, as a devoted father, was blinded by paternal affection, while others theorize that he sought to preserve his dynasty by maintaining power within his family. Whatever his reasoning, the decision to appoint Commodus as emperor marked a turning point for Rome, one that many historians regard as the beginning of the empire's gradual decline. As we reflect on this controversial succession, it raises timeless questions about the balance between family loyalty and the greater good. Moving forward, we delve into the tumultuous alliances of an infamous Hun leader whose strategic partnerships with his adversaries left both his followers and his enemies questioning his true intentions. As the next chapter of history unfolds, we turn to the turbulent life of Attila, the fierce leader of the Huns, whose name still echoes as a symbol of unrelenting power. Among his many calculated decisions, one stands out for its sheer controversy: his strategic alliances with Roman factions. Known for his ferocity on the battlefield and his relentless campaigns against the Roman Empire, Attila's choice to align with certain Roman leaders during select campaigns left both his followers and his enemies questioning his true motives. At first glance, this decision appeared to be a masterstroke of strategy. By forming alliances with Roman factions, Attila not only gained material support and intelligence, but also exploited Roman internal divisions to his advantage, weakening his enemies without direct confrontation. However, these alliances came at a significant cost to his reputation. Many of his loyal followers, drawn together by their shared defiance against Roman dominance, viewed these partnerships as a betrayal of their cause. To ally with the very empire they sought to undermine seemed contradictory and hypocritical, creating unrest within his tribal confederations. The Huns valued strength and independence, and any perceived compromise with their enemies risked undermining Attila's authority and the unity of his coalition. Moreover, such alliances were often short-lived, as trust between the Huns and the Romans was tenuous at best. Both sides were driven by self-interest, and any perceived slight or shift in priorities could unravel the fragile agreements. Attila's decision to ally with the Romans also raised questions about his long-term strategy. Was this a calculated move to buy time and resources for his campaigns, or did it reflect a deeper uncertainty about his ability to sustain opposition against the Roman Empire? While some historians argue that these alliances showcased Attila's tactical brilliance in navigating the complexities of power dynamics, others suggest that they exposed a rare vulnerability in his otherwise fearsome reign. Ultimately, these alliances left a mixed legacy. On one hand, they demonstrated the adaptability and pragmatism that made Attila a formidable force during his time. On the other, they sowed discord among his followers and planted seeds of doubt about his unwavering commitment to their cause. This controversial decision serves as a reminder of the delicate balance leaders must strike between pragmatism and principle. As we look ahead, we find ourselves stepping into the fortified walls of ancient Athens, where a bold leader faced the wrath of his peers for fortifying the city amidst suspicion and rivalry. As the next challenge unfolds, we delve into the strategic mind of Themistocles, the Athenian statesman whose vision for Athens' survival and dominance shaped the course of ancient Greece. Following the Persian invasion, Athens lay in ruins, and many believed the city's prominence would never recover. Yet, Themistocles saw an opportunity amidst the devastation. He proposed fortifying Athens with long walls connecting the city to its port at Piraeus. This bold endeavor, he argued, would secure Athens as a naval powerhouse, ensuring a steady supply line and establishing the city as virtually impregnable by land. However, this decision was met with sharp criticism, especially from rival Greek city-states such as Sparta. To the Spartans, whose military power rested on land-based dominance, the construction of these walls posed a direct challenge. They feared Athens was consolidating too much power, shifting the balance of influence among the Greek states. Sparta openly accused Themistocles of undermining the fragile unity that had held the Greeks together during the Persian Wars. Many Athenians, on the other hand, were hesitant to divert precious resources to such an ambitious construction project when they were still struggling to rebuild their homes and recover from the war. Yet Themistocles was nothing if not resourceful. Seeing the political landscape for what it was, he managed to outmaneuver Spartan objections with a masterful blend of diplomacy and deception. He delayed Spartan envoys with assurances that Athens would comply with their concerns, all while secretly accelerating the construction. By the time the Spartans realized what was happening, the walls were already nearing completion. This tactic was not just a testament to Themistocles' ingenuity, but also a reminder of the cutthroat nature of ancient politics. Despite the controversy, the fortification of Athens proved to be a turning point for the city. It solidified Athens' position as a dominant naval power and laid the groundwork for the rise of the Athenian Empire. However, it also deepened divides within the Greek world, sowing mistrust between Athens and Sparta, which would eventually culminate in the long and devastating Peloponnesian War. Themistocles' decision to prioritize Athens' security at the expense of broader Greek unity remains a classic example of a leader taking audacious risks to safeguard his city's future. As we leave the fortified walls of Athens behind, we now shift our focus to the isolated shores of Japan, where a shogun's decision to close off his country from the wider world sparked both protection and controversy. Now turning to the isolated shores of Japan, we examine the transformative decision of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the shogun who sought to shield his nation from the outside world. In the early 1600s, Japan faced growing influence from European traders and missionaries, whose presence brought not only commerce and new technologies but also religious conversion and cultural upheaval. Ieyasu, recognizing the destabilizing potential of foreign interference, implemented the Sakoku policy, a radical move to close Japan's borders to nearly all outside contact. This policy, which lasted for more than 2 centuries, was designed to preserve Japanese culture, maintain internal stability, and prevent the dilution of power held by the Tokugawa shogunate. However, this decision did not come without its share of controversy. Domestically, many Japanese merchants and entrepreneurs opposed the restrictions as they saw lucrative opportunities in international trade slipping away. The ban on foreign influence also extended to severe punishments for Japanese citizens who attempted to leave the country or who maintained contact with outsiders. Meanwhile, Christian converts in Japan faced persecution as the Tokugawa government sought to eliminate the perceived threat of loyalty to a foreign religion. This suppression created tension within Japanese society, with entire communities uprooted or forced to renounce their faith. From an international standpoint, the isolationist stance frustrated European powers and neighboring countries, especially those who saw Japan as a valuable trading partner. The policy led to heightened tensions with nations such as Portugal, Spain, and later the Netherlands, as their access to Japan's markets became severely restricted. Limited exceptions were made for highly controlled interactions at designated ports such as Dejima, but these measures were far from satisfying to foreign traders. In the long term, while Sakoku preserved Japan's cultural and political structures, it also led to stagnation in technological and scientific advancements during a period when the rest of the world was rapidly modernizing. When Japan finally opened its borders in the mid-19th century, the country was at a significant disadvantage compared to the industrialized Western powers. This vulnerability eventually culminated in the forced opening of Japan by American naval expeditions, showcasing the profound consequences of Tokugawa Ieyasu's isolationist gamble. Tokugawa's policy remains a subject of debate among historians who grapple with its dual legacy of cultural preservation and economic stagnation. Was it a necessary step to protect Japan's sovereignty, or did it hinder the nation's potential to thrive in a rapidly globalizing world? As the curtain falls on Japan's isolation, we now turn our attention to the blood-soaked arenas of ancient Constantinople, where a Byzantine emperor's ruthless decision to suppress unrest left lasting scars on his reign. As the next challenge unfolds, we find ourselves in the heart of ancient Constantinople during the reign of Emperor Justinian. In the year 532, this Byzantine ruler faced one of the most dramatic crises of his rule, the Nika riots. What began as a seemingly routine dispute between rival chariot racing factions, the Blues and the Greens, quickly erupted into an uncontrollable uprising. The riots were fueled by widespread discontent over high taxes and perceived corruption within Justinian's administration, with furious crowds demanding political reform and even calling for the emperor's removal. Justinian, aware that his throne and possibly his life hung in the balance, initially considered fleeing the city. However, his wife, the formidable Empress Theodora, persuaded him to stand his ground, famously declaring that she preferred to die an empress rather than live in exile. Bolstered by her resolve, Justinian made a fateful decision. He ordered the brutal suppression of the riots. Employing the seasoned general Belisarius, Justinian lured the rebels into the hippodrome under the pretense of negotiations. Once gathered, his troops launched a merciless assault, leaving an estimated 30,000 people dead. This decisive yet devastating action crushed the rebellion and secured Justinian's hold on power, but at a tremendous cost. The massacre stained Justinian's reputation, portraying him as a ruler willing to shed rivers of blood to maintain control. While the riots were successfully quelled and stability restored, the sheer scale of the violence left a lasting scar on his legacy. Even so, Justinian's gamble preserved his ambitious plans to reshape the Byzantine Empire, including his monumental legal reforms and architectural achievements like the Hagia Sophia. Historians continue to debate whether this ruthless decision was a necessary act of leadership or an unforgivable atrocity. Did Justinian's calculated cruelty safeguard the future of his empire, or was it an act of desperation that revealed the fragile foundations of his rule? With the echoes of the Hippodrome's horrors reverberating through history, we now cross into the battlefields of early medieval Europe, where Charlemagne's conquest-fueled mission to expand his empire brought with it a controversial campaign of forced religious conversions. With the next phase of the journey in sight, we move to early medieval Europe, where Charlemagne, often hailed as the father of Europe, pursued a vision of uniting his vast empire under a single faith. As part of his conquests in the 8th and 9th centuries, Charlemagne faced the defiant Saxons, a fiercely independent pagan people who resisted Frankish domination. After years of relentless warfare, Charlemagne made a contentious choice to consolidate his power and spread Christianity through forced conversions. For the Saxons, the stakes were clear: embrace the new religion or face brutal consequences, One of the most infamous examples of this policy was the massacre of Verdun, where thousands of Saxon prisoners were executed after refusing to abandon their beliefs. While Charlemagne's supporters viewed these actions as a necessary step to unify and strengthen his empire, critics have long condemned the coercion and violence that accompanied his efforts. From a practical perspective, forced conversions allowed Charlemagne to establish common religious ground across his dominion, reinforcing loyalty to the Frankish crown and the expanding influence of the Church. Yet morally, this approach raised profound questions about the ethics of imposing faith through fear and bloodshed. The legacy of Charlemagne's decision is deeply polarizing. On one hand, his campaigns laid the groundwork for the Christianization of much of Europe, aligning his empire with the growing authority of the papacy. On the other hand, the methods he employed, marked by atrocities and cultural erasure, cast a shadow over the triumphs of his reign. Does the end justify the means? This question continues to echo through the corridors of history as we leave the battlefield of Saxon resistance and turn to the reforms of a Russian Tsar who challenged tradition and reshaped an entire nation. As the next challenge unfolds, we find ourselves in the late 17th century, where Russia stood at a crossroads between its deeply rooted traditions and the allure of modernization. At the helm was Peter the Great, a ruler whose vision for his nation was as ambitious as it was divisive. Determined to propel Russia into the ranks of European powers, Peter enacted a sweeping series of reforms aimed at westernizing nearly every aspect of Russian life. These changes would come to define his reign and spark intense controversy that endures in discussions of his legacy. One of Peter's most infamous measures was the implementation of the beard tax, a policy that many saw as an outright attack on traditional Russian identity. Beards, symbolizing piety and dignity in Russian culture, were a point of pride for many Orthodox Christians, yet in Peter's eyes they represented the backwardness he sought to leave behind. Under his decree, men who refused to shave were required to pay a hefty fee and carry a token as proof of compliance. For many Russians, this mandate was not just an inconvenience but a direct affront to their religious and cultural values. Beyond the beard tax, Peter's westernization policies extended into clothing, education, and even social customs. Traditional Russian attire was replaced with European fashions, and noble families were compelled to adopt Western etiquette from how they dined to how they interacted in court. He established new schools to promote sciences and military training, sent young Russians abroad to learn foreign techniques, and modernized the military with European weaponry and strategies. While these changes undoubtedly strengthened the state's administrative and military structures, they alienated large segments of the population, particularly the conservative nobility and the Orthodox Church, who saw Peter's drive for modernization as a betrayal of Russia's sacred traditions. Yet, Peter's reforms also laid the foundation for Russia's rise as a major global power. By embracing advancements in technology, education, and industry, he bridged the gap between Russia and its European counterparts, ensuring his nation could compete on a larger stage. His efforts transformed St. Petersburg into a symbol of progress, showcasing Russia's new face to the world. But the cost of these changes was immense, both culturally and politically. For all the progress achieved, Peter's policies left a deep divide within Russian society, a clash between old and new, tradition and innovation that would shape Russia's identity for centuries to come. With Peter's tumultuous reign as a backdrop, we now shift our focus across the Atlantic, where a Spanish conqueror's encounter with a mighty empire led to one of history's most contentious conquests. Now turning to the shores of the New World, we confront one of history's most polarizing figures, Hernán Cortés. His controversial decision to overthrow the mighty Aztec Empire forever altered the course of history, cementing his legacy as both a bold tactician and a ruthless opportunist. It was in the early 16th century that Cortés arrived in Mexico with a mere few hundred men, driven by a combination of ambition, greed, and religious fervor. At the heart of his campaign was the city of Tenochtitlan, a sprawling metropolis that dazzled Europeans with its architectural brilliance and wealth. However, Cortés did not see grandeur. He saw an empire ripe for conquest. What made his strategy particularly contentious was his cunning manipulation of existing rivalries among the indigenous peoples. Understanding the tensions between the Aztecs and neighboring tribes, Cortés forged alliances that allowed him to bolster his small force with thousands of native warriors. To those tribes, this alliance was a means of retribution against Aztec oppression, but to Cortés, it was a calculated step toward domination. His ability to pit groups against one another showcased not only his tactical brilliance, but also a willingness to exploit divisions for his own gain. The conquest reached its brutal climax in the siege of Tenochtitlan. Despite initial moments of diplomacy, Cortés resorted to violence and deception to achieve his aims. He captured the Aztec Emperor Montezuma, ultimately using him as a pawn to control the empire before discontent among the populace spiraled into chaos. The siege itself was marked by devastation, as starvation, disease, and relentless warfare left the city in ruins. The moral ambiguity of Cortés' actions cannot be overstated. To some, he was a visionary, expanding Spanish influence and spreading Christianity to the New World. To others, he was a symbol of greed and destruction, whose conquest decimated one of the most advanced civilizations of the era. The decision to destroy the Aztec Empire was not only a military maneuver but also a cultural annihilation. Temples were torn down, traditions erased, and a once thriving society was reshaped under the shadow of colonial rule. The legacy of Cortés remains deeply divisive. While his actions paved the way for the Spanish colonization of the Americas, they also epitomized the devastating consequences of imperial ambition. The story of Hernán Cortés serves as a stark reminder of the complex interplay between conquest and culture, ambition and morality. As we leave the wreckage of Tenochtitlan behind, we now journey to England, where a king's determination to defy the Catholic Church reshaped an entire nation's religious landscape. As the next challenge unfolds, we find ourselves in the tumultuous 9th century, where England's survival hung by a thread under the shadow of relentless Viking invasions. At the heart of this struggle stood Alfred the Great, a king whose wisdom and resilience would come to define his reign. Faced with the might of Viking forces, Alfred made a decision that would be both celebrated and criticized throughout history. He chose negotiation over outright conflict. This choice culminated in the establishment of the Danelaw, a vast region of England under Viking control, which emerged as part of a treaty following years of fierce battles. By conceding land to the Vikings, Alfred created a buffer zone, allowing Wessex to remain a stronghold of Anglo-Saxon rule. This approach was nothing short of pragmatic genius. It bought Alfred time to regroup, fortify his defenses, and strengthen his military, laying the foundation for future resistance. However, not everyone viewed this compromise favorably. Many saw it as a concession of sovereignty, a gesture of weakness in the face of aggression. For Alfred, though, it was a calculated move. He understood that survival often required shrewd diplomacy as much as military might. The Danelaw not only provided a temporary reprieve, but also established clear boundaries between Viking and Anglo-Saxon territories. Alfred used the peace to implement reforms, from reorganizing the military to creating a system of fortified towns known as burhs, which would prove essential in containing future Viking threats. Beyond military strategy, Alfred's decision also had profound cultural implications. By securing time, he preserved Anglo-Saxon traditions, laws, and religious practices in the regions that remained under his control, ensuring that they were not entirely overshadowed by Norse influence. His reign became a symbol of endurance, showing that adaptability and negotiation could sometimes achieve what endless war could not. Yet, the controversial nature of Alfred's decision lingers. Was it a masterstroke of diplomacy that saved his kingdom, or a reluctant compromise that ceded too much ground to foreign invaders? The answer, perhaps, lies in the enduring legacy of Wessex as the nucleus of a unified England. Alfred's ability to balance force with foresight ensured that his kingdom not only survived but emerged stronger in the long run. With the Danelaw marking a pivotal moment in the history of England, we turn now to the rise of a warrior queen who dared to challenge the might of Rome itself. As the next phase of the story unfolds, we find ourselves in ancient Britain, where the fierce and defiant figure of Boudicca rises to the forefront. Boudicca, the queen of the Iceni tribe, made a decision that would echo through history. Faced with the brutal oppression of Roman occupation, including the confiscation of Iceni lands and the horrific treatment of her family, Boudicca chose rebellion over submission. Her decision to lead an uprising against Rome was both a rallying cry for freedom and a calculated response to the humiliation inflicted upon her people. With a coalition of tribes united under her banner, Boudicca's forces swept through Roman towns in Britain, including the strategic center of Londinium, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Her tactics were bold and uncompromising, designed to strike fear into the hearts of her Roman adversaries. For some, this was an act of justified vengeance, a defiant stand against an empire that had overstepped its bounds. For others, especially Roman chroniclers, Boudicca's methods were condemned as excessively brutal, painting her uprising as a chaotic and unrestrained rebellion. The extent of the devastation brought by her forces remains a point of debate among historians, but there is no denying the scale of her impact. Boudicca's campaign forced Rome to reconsider its approach to ruling Britain, ultimately strengthening their hold on the province. Yet her rebellion also served as a stark reminder of the relentless spirit of the subjugated tribes. Even in defeat at the Battle of Watling Street, where Roman forces under Governor Suetonius outmaneuvered her larger army, Boudicca's legacy was secured. She became a symbol of resistance, embodying the courage to stand against overwhelming odds. Today, Boudicca is remembered as both a tragic figure and a hero, her story reshaped through the lens of time. For the oppressed, she represents defiance and the unyielding fight for justice. For others, her rebellion serves as a cautionary tale of the devastation that unchecked fury can bring. As we reflect on her decisions and their consequences, Boudicca's legacy continues to inspire discussions about leadership, resistance, and the cost of freedom. With her fierce campaign drawing to a close, we now move to a leader in the East whose decisions would not only unify a vast empire, but also challenge the very traditions that defined it. Now turning to Julius Caesar and his monumental decision to cross the Rubicon, we delve deeper into the perspective of his detractors and the lasting controversy it sparked. For Caesar's opponents, this act was nothing less than a betrayal of the Republic's very foundations. By crossing the river with his army in defiance of Roman law, Caesar flouted the long-standing tradition that protected the Republic from military overreach. To many in the Senate, this was not the calculated move of a statesman, but the bold gamble of a man driven by ambition. They painted him as a power-hungry figure who undermined the delicate balance of authority that kept Rome from descending into tyranny. In their eyes, this single decision marked him as a traitor who sought to dismantle the Republic for his own gain. Historians and commentators in the years following Caesar's assassination were equally divided. Some chroniclers, aligned with the ideals of the senatorial elite, echoed the sentiment that Caesar's actions were reckless and self-serving. They portrayed him as a disruptor whose ambition set a dangerous precedent for future leaders. Others, however, argued that Caesar's decision, though controversial, was a necessary step in addressing the inefficiencies and inequities of an increasingly fragile republic. For the Roman citizens of the time, the view was similarly complex. Those who suffered under the corruption and stagnation of the Senate saw Caesar as a champion of the common people, a leader willing to challenge the status quo in pursuit of a stronger and more unified Rome. Yet for others, his crossing of the Rubicon symbolized the end of an era and the beginning of Rome's descent into autocracy. The years following Caesar's assassination offered little clarity, as his legacy continued to be debated, molded, and reframed to suit varying agendas. His critics held fast to the idea that his ascent paved the way for the collapse of the Republic, while his supporters emphasized the stability and prosperity his reforms would later bring under imperial rule. Even today, the act of crossing the Rubicon serves as a powerful metaphor for making an irreversible decision, one that carries immense risk and potentially transformative consequences. With this pivotal moment in Roman history examined, we now turn to the story of a leader who, through bold alliances, altered not just the course of her nation but the fate of an entire region. Now turning to Cleopatra and her fateful alliances with Julius Caesar and later Marc Antony, we unravel the layers of long-term influence and controversy surrounding her decisions. To the Romans of her time, Cleopatra was often portrayed as a scheming seductress who manipulated powerful men to secure her own ambitions. This narrative, crafted largely by her detractors, overshadowed her role as a shrewd political strategist deeply committed to preserving the autonomy of Egypt. By aligning herself with Caesar, Cleopatra secured her throne and ensured Egypt's protection amid the chaos of Roman civil wars. But to her critics in Rome, this partnership symbolized a dangerous entanglement, one that blurred the lines between Roman supremacy and foreign influence. Her subsequent alliance with Marc Antony further fueled Roman hostility, culminating in the propaganda campaign waged by Octavian, who painted her as an existential threat to Rome's stability. Cleopatra's choice to side with Antony during his conflict with Octavian cemented her image as an antagonist in Roman accounts. They depicted her not as a queen fighting for her nation's survival, but as a foreign temptress whose ambitions jeopardized the future of Rome. However, modern historians have re-examined Cleopatra's life through a more balanced lens, recognizing her as a capable leader navigating a perilous political landscape. Her decisions, though controversial, can be seen as bold attempts to protect Egypt in the face of overwhelming Roman dominance. Despite the vilification she endured, Cleopatra's cultural and political impact endured long after her death. Her story continues to inspire debates about power, gender, and agency, making her one of history's most enigmatic figures. With Cleopatra's legacy reconsidered, we now delve into the bold yet divisive decisions of another ancient leader, whose military audacity redefined the art of warfare and provoked admiration and outrage in equal measure. As the next challenge unfolds, we explore Hannibal's audacious decision to lead his army across the towering Alps during the Second Punic War. This daring maneuver was not merely a military strategy. It was a statement of defiance against Rome, showcasing his determination to strike at the heart of his enemy. The journey itself was a feat of endurance and resilience, as Hannibal's forces faced some of the most unforgiving terrain in the ancient world. Steep cliffs, icy conditions, and treacherous paths made the Alps a natural barrier that few would dare to cross, let alone with an army of tens of thousands. Adding to the challenge were the logistical nightmares of transporting war elephants, creatures both symbolic of Carthaginian power and crucial to the psychological warfare Hannibal intended to unleash on the Roman forces. The soldiers and animals alike endured extreme cold, hunger, and exhaustion. Many succumbed to the harsh conditions, and it is estimated that nearly half of his army perished before even reaching Italy. Despite these staggering losses, Hannibal's successful crossing of the Alps stands as one of history's most remarkable military achievements. His contemporaries were divided in their views of this bold move. To his supporters, Hannibal's determination and tactical genius elevated him to legendary status, a commander willing to risk everything for the element of surprise and strategic advantage. However, critics, particularly among the Romans, viewed his actions as reckless and overly ambitious, arguing that the immense cost of his journey undermined its initial success. Yet those who witnessed his campaign could not deny the impact of his arrival in Italy. By catching Rome off guard, Hannibal achieved a series of stunning victories, including the infamous Battle of Cannae, which cemented his reputation as one of the greatest military minds in history. Even so, the high price paid during his Alpine crossing has fueled centuries of debate. Was it a masterstroke of military innovation, or did it reveal the dangers of overreaching ambition? With Hannibal's bold gamble laid bare, we now turn to another ancient leader whose radical vision sparked both reverence and rebellion in equal measure. Now turning to Akhenaten's religious revolution, we delve into one of the most radical and polarizing decisions in ancient Egyptian history. Akhenaten, originally known as Amenhotep IV, shook the very foundations of Egyptian society by abandoning centuries of polytheistic tradition in favor of monotheistic worship dedicated solely to Aten, the sun disk. This unprecedented shift was not merely a theological decision, it was a complete reimagining of Egyptian culture and governance. The pharaoh established Aten as the supreme deity, elevating himself and his family as the exclusive intermediaries between the divine and humanity. To solidify this transformation, he built a new capital city, Akhetaten, now known as Amarna, centered around the worship of Aten. This decision alienated powerful factions within Egyptian society, particularly the influential priests of Ammon, whose authority was undermined by Akhenaten's reforms. The abrupt dissolution of traditional polytheism disrupted deeply ingrained societal norms, leaving many Egyptians feeling betrayed and uncertain about their spiritual identities. The economic complexities of relocating the court and redirecting resources to Akhetaten further intensified dissatisfaction among the populace. However, Akhenaten's vision extended beyond religious reform. He sought to reshape Egypt's artistic and cultural landscape. Under his rule, art took on a distinctive style, characterized by more naturalistic and intimate portrayals of the royal family, a stark departure from the rigid and idealized forms of earlier periods. While some admired this bold break from convention, others saw it as yet another affront to tradition. After Akhenaten's death, his successors wasted no time erasing his legacy. The city of Akhetaten was abandoned, and the old polytheistic system was restored with fervor. Statues, inscriptions, and monuments dedicated to Aten were systematically destroyed or repurposed, and Akhenaten himself was labeled a heretic, his name omitted from official king lists. This orchestrated effort to obliterate his memory, an act known as damnatio memoriae, speaks volumes about the resistance his revolution faced both during and after his reign. Yet despite these setbacks, Akhenaten's legacy endures as a fascinating chapter in history. Was he a visionary ahead of his time, daring to confront the status quo, or a ruler whose radical ideas were doomed to fail in a deeply traditional society? As we reflect on Akhenaten's controversial revolution, we move forward to explore another leader whose groundbreaking decisions continue to shape the way we view history today. As the sun rises on the next chapter, we wrap up our journey through the bold and often polarizing choices of ancient leaders. These decisions, whether born out of ambition, vision, or necessity, have left indelible marks on the tapestry of history. From Julius Caesar's defiance at the Rubicon to Akhenaten's revolutionary worship of Aten, each leader dared to challenge the norms of their time, with consequences that rippled through generations. Some of their choices brought glory and innovation, while others led to chaos and decline, but all of them remind us of the profound impact that leadership and decision-making carry. So, do great leaders need to court controversy to make history? Were these bold moves acts of brilliance, or were they reckless gambles with the futures of their societies? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating explorations of the mysteries of the past. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into history's most intriguing stories.